Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Flip Trader podcast. I'm your host, Ian. I have, my guest today is like, dude, we have been friends for so long. We've known each other for so long, and
Yeah.
we're going to get into it after I read your bio, which is long, and I'm going to read the entire thing because you have justified an entire bio read, not a short little abbreviated. Your bio needs to be read in full. So let me do that real quick, and then we can get into all the other fun stuff we have planned. Because I love watching you build, grow, operate. Like it's always cool for me. You're that guy for me that I know always has integrity, right? So I want to kind of put this out there to the audience and the people listening. Who is that person in your life that you always know will do the thing that's required of them, and that anything that they commit to, and not to say you don't have faults or failures, just to know that the thing that they commit to is the thing that they operate and execute on, and like you don't fail on that. And that's the cool part about watching you is I know when you get into something new, like you're going to put everything you got into it, and you're going to pivot with it, and you're going to move with it and flow with it. And it's cool to watch you do that, man.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
back to when we met, just really briefly. It is wild how I think it was 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
We're at an event and we're sitting in the coffee shop that morning, and it was just kind of like we just started chatting.
Yeah.
Like you were at one table with some friends, I was at another one by myself. We started chatting, and then what that ended up leading to was like bumping into each other again and seeing each other again. And then
Yeah.
when I took over the Rockstars podcast, you were previously helping with that one.
Yeah.
Man, it was just so many lines of overlap. So stoked to be here with your Flip Trader group and having a chance to talk today.
Dude, you're one of my first calls. I'm going to read your bio real quick because I want people to know who they got on this other end of the line. Okay. Aaron Amuchastegui. Just go back and rewind that. You're going to look at his last name and go, what? What did he just say? Yeah. It's Amuchastegui, right? Right, Aaron?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Real estate trend spotter, opportunist. He created a new real estate industry in 2009 with courthouse step foreclosures. And this guy is the absolute expert. Remember, that's our commitment, is to bring you top tier education led by the best in the business. He started investing heavily in Texas back in 2015 before the rise in values, and made huge bets in 2020 and 2021 that paid off in major ways. By his experience in real estate cycles over the past 25 years, he's able to analyze market trends, make bold predictions that most others are afraid to. And as a real estate entrepreneur, he hosts, well, you own it too, right? I mean, you host and own the real estate.
Own the podcast, host it a lot of the time.
Host the Real Estate Rockstars podcast. He compiles foreclosure data and teaches people how to become investors with Roddy's foreclosure listing service. And we're going to give you links for all this, by the way. He's bought and sold more than 1,000 investment flip homes. And his company, Home Rock, owns and manages hundreds of rental homes. So if you don't think that Aaron is qualified to tell you the best of the best of information, you're crazy. Now, here's the other cool part that I really like, right? Recent book, Bidding to Buy, is a bestseller published by Bigger Pockets. And the book that I love and my wife and I really loved that you co-wrote with your wife, Kalina, is The 5-Hour School Week, which is an inspirational homeschool guide created when he pulled his 4 kids out of school to travel the world. And dude, since I read that book, I realized that it was possible to have this dream of traveling the world and letting my kids experience the world as a playground and a classroom. Like, you opened that part up. So not only are you influential in all these other places, I read that book and I was like, wow, okay. And I know the guy doing it. So it's not some far-fetched idea. It's just like, we'll get into all that stuff. It's just, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun episode. So I want to make sure we get into the foreclosure stuff as well. But really, where it started was, and I love telling this story because I was terrified. I mean, terrified to meet anybody at this event that I went to where you were back in I think it was 2015. And we're in Tahoe, and we're sitting at a Starbucks at this really fancy hotel, and I'm on the phone with my wife going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go meet people. I don't want to do this. And then fast forward a couple years, our families are together at Mike's house in PA, Mike McCarthy, and your wife's saying the same thing about you. You're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to talk to these people. Yeah. So the moral of the story is Aaron and I somehow connect. Hey, you here for the event? You here for the event? Very like surface level. and just started chatting and formed this really cool, bond and friendship. And it's just kind of lasted the test of time, or withstood the test of time, I guess. And it just goes to show you that you just don't know what that one meeting or that one risk you take or that one thing you push yourself past in your fear or out of your comfort zone will do for you. And I really love that story because of those things, man. Plus, obviously, getting to be close with you and know your family. But those moments were a turning point in my personal growth journey. Really.
Yeah. I want to say for a second about that, how funny part of that is, because back then, yes, we're at an event that we paid a lot of money to go to. It was a
Yeah.
lot of money to us at the time. We probably both felt like we maybe weren't big enough of a deal to be there, and we were both introverts. And
Yes.
not really, so not introverts when we're comfortable, but like we weren't really comfortable. We just felt out of place and not as good as the other people that were there.
Right.
And what's funny is I would describe us as two of the least introverted people now.
Yeah.
Right. But the only reason that we really, got to chat and keep going is like, yes, I only like briefly met a couple people the first day and had like good conversations. So then if you only meet like 3 people out of 150, then every time you see them, you're like, oh yeah, that's the guy that I met. Right. So our conversations, kept going. And yes,
Yeah.
like sign up for events, show up for events, get a little bit outside the comfort zone. And I bet the person you're talking to is as nervous about it as you are.
Yeah. It's that comparison to others that always, frequently gets us and holds us back. We just don't realize how much that other person is, fear-based or intimidated or whatever it is. When I go to events like that, though, my introverted side is leading because I'm extroverted on here. Put me on a stage, I'm extroverted. Put me in front of a group of people that I know, I'm extroverted. Put me in a situation where I don't know anybody. Put me at 7:30 at night when I just cranked out a 10-hour day. You're not getting the extrovert. Like I was just at my buddy Chuck's house yesterday or the day before, coming back from our Flip Trader launch party, which was in Boston this weekend, which is awesome, really successful event. And I went to his house, and luckily I get to be me. I get to be the introverted me. So I got there at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like, let's not talk. Let's just chill and watch a movie, bro. I talk to you every day. I don't need to tell you anything about my life. The party was good. Leave it alone. And I think this is important for the audience because there are a lot of people that say, if I were like you, I could get more deals. If I were like you, I'd have a bigger business. And I go, you only know this side of me on a microphone or on a camera. But if you ask my wife, like I am an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert. And that means that I don't go to networking events very often. It means I don't go out and meet people very easily. I do, but I just choose not to because it just saps my energy, So, in this game that we're in the real estate investment game, networking and communicating with other people doing the same thing is massively important. However, if you're a massive introvert, you might not be doing that. So Aaron and I are here to tell you that you can do this. You just have to kind of set a goal, meet like, 3 to 5 people instead of trying to go around and meeting everybody, which will zap your energy. And then you didn't get any depth. You just got handshakes and names, which you're going to forget anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In reality, practice takes perfect, and everything we start at, we're no good at it. And the more times we do it, so no matter what, it's going to be a great thing. We talk about foreclosures and real estate too, but even meeting people,
Yeah.
nothing's easy the first time you do it. The more you do it, the easier it gets.
Dude, what's interesting is, and this is another tie-in with you, is in 2018 or 2019, I asked Pat, who was the guy who founded and started Real Estate Rockstars podcast, which was a very, even at that time was a very dominant player in the real estate podcast game. And I just said to him, and I was afraid that I like telling this story because it just shows what action will do. I texted him one morning at 5:30 in the morning, and I said, "Hey, I want to shadow you. I want to mentor. I want to just see what you do. I'm interested in learning more about podcasting." And I was doing a little bit of podcasting before that. And he said, "Sure, come on tomorrow." I went on the next day, and he wound up giving me like 4 interviews to do by myself. And I was terrified. And the thing he said to me was the same thing you just said. Your first one's going to suck, dude. And the worst thing is you met some people and we don't air it. It's the worst thing that's going to happen, but you'll know more because I know that you'll go back and listen to those and figure out what you didn't do well or what you would do better next time. So you just never know in the context of relationships, you just never know which relationship has a next, series of paths or another path to it. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And now, ironically, you own Real Estate Rockstars.
Yes. Well, even when I took over Rockstars, when I bought it and I was trying to get people out there, I mean, you were one of the guys I was talking to about continuing to hosting, right? And
Right.
that was part of Pat's idea. And it was so funny. Pat's like, there's this guy named Ian that you should talk to. And I was like, wait, I know Ian.
Yeah.
But you were meant to have your own show, man. You weren't
Yeah.
meant to be part of a team or second, or second in line as something else. And so when that was time, you decided to go run your own, and you've been,
Yeah.
and you've been doing that ever since. And I think it's been great.
Yeah, dude. So to the audience who's listening live inside of our Flip Trader Facebook group, go ahead and comment foreclosures, put your questions, put your comments in. We are live inside the group. So at the end of this, we can pull up your questions for Aaron. And then remember, on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, Aaron's going to be back to get into the real meat of what he does and what his expertise is in buying foreclosures and why he's done over 1,000 deals. So make sure you drop that in there, drop foreclosures or drop your questions or comments in. I'll bring them up and Aaron will answer them. So, dude, I kind of want to go back. What's that?
What time are we doing it on Thursday again?
7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific.
All right.
And if you're listening on the podcast on Spotify or iTunes or something, and you haven't joined the Facebook group yet, get your butt over to Flip Trader Facebook group and join it because there's so much value, training, education, podcasts. There's so much stuff in here for everybody. And yeah, it's awesome, man. So, dude, I want to kind of give people an understanding of your story and how you got into this, because when I read that bio, I think a lot of people, maybe in their insecurity, will say, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that, or Aaron's special, or, and I kind of bring this up with a lot of the interviews I do because I want to really showcase that none of us are more special than the other. We just have a formula that we dialed in that we hit on and we course corrected along the way. So, like, how did you get started in all this?
Yeah. The worst thing about my bio, right? The worst thing about owning 800 houses and owning the 7 companies, the worst thing about all that is I have this giant fear, and it happens sometimes, that I instantly become unrelatable.
Huh.
And the eyes gloss over. And so I love the opportunity to talk about how it started.
Yeah.
Because how it started and how that happened was years and years of one at a time real estate. I grew up in real estate. I grew up in a construction house. My dad was a custom home builder. So I grew up with kind of understanding a little bit about how real estate worked, but I thought essentially that people sold houses for 10% more than they cost to build them. That's what I thought real estate was. I thought it was just, hey, whatever the cost is, it's cost plus 10%. I didn't understand anything else on how you would establish sales prices. And then I'll fast forward through a bunch of different life lessons that'll probably be for another podcast. I graduated with a degree in construction management in 2005 in California. It was the height of the housing boom. And so at the height of the housing boom, I was really, really heavily recruited, and I got to go be the director of operations at a home builder. And so in 06, 07, I'm getting paid, more than 6 figures a year, fresh out of school. I'm golfing 2 days a week. Life is awesome because as soon as we could build them, we had them lined up to sell.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like 2021, right? Like as soon as you built the house, it was pre-sold. No matter what you did, it was like, if you were in the real estate game and you were building houses in 2021, you were printing money and life was easy. Well, that's how it was in 2006 and 2007. And then the housing market crashed. And that was just this crazy rude awakening that, like, we had been talking about, we'd been seeing it. And all of a sudden revenue went down a little bit and revenue went down a little bit. And the company that I worked for that had 75 employees, they laid off 70 people. And they messaged me that day. That means there's 5 of us left. And there was the 3 owners, their cousin and me. And they said, hey, if you can move to Sacramento by Monday, you can keep your job. I was living in Santa Barbara, California. So it was like a Friday. If you can move here by Monday, you can keep your job. But if not, like, we just laid off everybody else. So also, like, no pressure. Like, you don't have to move to Sacramento, but like it is what it is. And man, I moved to Sacramento on Monday, and I went from making, good, what I thought was good, high six figures job to pay got cut in half. And I had to like figure out what to do next. So it was like quickly going from like making a lot to not making much money and
Yeah.
trying to figure out what was going to happen next. And during that time, we kept trying to start a bunch of different businesses. And this thing that kept sticking out is like, if you're a home builder and houses aren't selling anymore, you have a very unique set of skills that isn't necessarily relatable with any other industries. And we were like, how can we use the stuff that we're really, really good at? Like I was the best at construction management. I was the best at running home building stuff, but all of a sudden, no one's going to buy a house.
Right.
And we started seeing foreclosures, and in foreclosures 09 at the time. And really the reason the builder had to lay everybody off is we had whole neighborhoods that we were selling houses for like $700,000. But then foreclosures happened to the houses we sold the year before, and they went from 700,000 to 200,000.
Yikes.
Well, you can no longer sell your houses anymore because people would actually offer, but they wouldn't appraise. And so we essentially had to do these giant short sale packages of hundreds of houses at a time, and went from golfing to like doing manual labor, driving 2 hours to the job sites. Like we couldn't pay people to do the work because we didn't have money to pay them anymore. And so no one would do the work for us. And so we were like doing it ourselves to do these workouts. And we worked out some really cool deals that maybe we'll talk about at a future deal too. But the long story short, we started like driving by this like foreclosure for sale. You get out of the car and they were like, there's spray paint in them and holes in the drywall. And they're selling this house for $300,000. And like, wow, this is like a $500,000 house a year ago. I'd love to be able to buy it. And we were like, that's our unique set of skills. We'll buy this house, fix it and sell it. Well, we were never able to buy one of those regular REOs. We'd make offers on them and people would like say, oh, sorry, we already accepted a full price offer. And then we started doing this deal where we would write offers like the minute they came out on MLS. Sorry, we already accepted an offer and it was higher than yours.
Yeah.
And we did everything. And what we learned was they were just feeding it to certain investors. The agents that got the listings from the banks, different investors made them a deal, said, hey, if you sell it to us, we'll have you relist it. We'll pay you to relist it twice. So why would they let me buy it?
Of course.
If their buddy's going to give them an extra 6 or 10 grand. And there were so many of them that there was like no real regulation keeping track of it. The bank really didn't care. They were like they just wanted things sold.
Get rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were like, what are we going to do? And then somewhere along the line, we discovered, well, what happens first? So before it becomes an REO, it's a courthouse step foreclosure where there's no guarantees on how that works. You don't get title insurance. It's this complicated process. But there was a website that came out at the time that was like posting like, here's a foreclosure notice. And we showed up at our first auction and we watched them for like, a week or two. And nothing was happening at auction that week or two. But we watched auction for a week or two. And there were like 2 or 3 guys sitting there and 100 houses would sell and they'd each buy a few every day. And you try to ask them questions, they wouldn't tell you anything. It's very kind of archaic process. And then from that sheet, we saw there was a specific house that was for sale. And I spent the week like reading all the loan documents, trying to understand how it was going to work. Like we're scared to death because no one's telling you how foreclosures work. There was no website. There was no guru. There was no classes. So we're reading loan documents to understand like what actually happens. Cause they do specify in the loan documents how the trustee sale works.
Right.
And so then we go to auction the next week and we've got some money that as a builder, one of the other things that we figured out during the time was commercial contractors were a lot more expensive than residential contractors. So we were actually bidding on these hotels that were getting built and we would like we would get quotes from our framers that were building out our residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And we would charge a markup and go like work on these like this commercial stuff. So we made a little bit of money during that time doing that. We had a little bit of money saved up as the company and went to that first auction. And so we go and Eddie shows up and he rides up on his skateboard. He puts his laptop out on the trash can. He's reading a sheet. And he calls out the address and says going once, going twice. And Glenn, this guy I was with, goes, excuse me. And then he goes, yeah, would you like to bid? He goes, yeah, I want to bid. And he goes, a penny over? And he goes, yes, a penny over. And he goes, going once, going twice, sold. And Eddie grabs our checks. And the 2 or 3 other bidders there kind of gasp, like, what are you doing? As they gasp, we're like, what happened? What went wrong? We're filling out the paperwork with Eddie. We're like, wait, it doesn't say the address on it. When will they send us the deed? We're asking him all these questions. And he's like, that's not my job. It's not my job to put the address on there. I don't know about any of this stuff. Like, he just goes through that process. He rides off on his skateboard. And for the next 2 weeks, we're terrified because these other guys are like making fun of us for buying it.
Yeah.
We just gave this guy our life savings. We don't have his phone number. The receipt we have looks crazy. But the long story short, it was like meant to happen. It was a journey I was supposed to be on because we got a deed a couple weeks later. We went and recorded it and got a title report. We owned the house free and clear. We bought it for like $120,000. We paid the person like $4,000 to move out. We spent like $4,000 to fix it. We listed it on the market for $190,000 because every other house in that neighborhood was a short sale.
Yeah.
Like listed between 200 and 300, but 190 was really what it was worth. And because we were the only game in town, we got multiple offers and we sold that thing in a heartbeat. We thought, oh my God, we just discovered a new business.
Yeah.
And kind of like right now too, there's a lot of houses on the market, but like buyers can't really pay what they're worth because of rates. Like there's a lot of people want to sell for $400,000 in a neighborhood. Buyers can only afford $300,000 in that neighborhood.
Yep.
If somebody came to market with a house at $300,000 in the neighborhood, it would work. So that's a lot like, so 09 was a lot like it is right now when it comes to like gaps in inventory is really because nobody has cheap inventory.
Yeah.
Right. Like so next few weeks, we go back to auction every day. We don't get a single house. What we realize is we got beginner's luck the first time. You don't show up just trying to target one house.
Yeah.
But that was just God's plan for me. Right. So if I hadn't bought a house the first day, I would have given up after 2 or 3 weeks because it was hard. But after a few weeks, I was able to discover the process of what it really takes to buy at auction, what it really takes to be able to do this at scale. And I was able to essentially take what I learned as a home builder with the same systems, construction teams, sales and marketing teams.
Sure.
It's just instead of buying land and building, we were buying foreclosures and fixing them, and so it was a slightly different process, but it was similar business plan, but like shorter turnaround time. And I was able to find investors to invest in me. That gets to be a fun story all by itself. But like what happened from 2009 to 2012 was we were able to flip 1,000 houses. Investors put down, I didn't have $1 to my name at the time. When I first got started, my first 2 flips I did for free to prove out the models after I left the guys that I was working with to go do it myself. My dad was my first investor and I had the first 2 flips for free just to show him I could do it.
Yeah.
And then we were able to turn that into a large investment fund and flip tons and tons of houses. It looks like Ian's family is joining us. Somebody might get to say, Brad,
Guys.
Today I'm podcasting from the office. So it's going to be the only day that Brax doesn't join us.
Yeah. It's a family affair, man. Like
dude, I tell you what, any of you guys that listen to my Real Estate Rockstars podcast, when I do it from my home studio, everyone has seen Brax with his shirt off. My 7-year-old's been coming on my podcast since he was 4. And he'll come join shows all the time. So hello to whoever came and went. But we flipped 1,000 houses during that time. We delivered tons and tons of investor equity and profit, and it was crazy. And so it was an amazing time that first. After that, I've had a few different journeys with it, but like we'll stop there and just start with that's how I got into foreclosures. I had to figure out a system that no one was teaching. And I think I have bought more foreclosure courthouse steps than any other like single individual, than any other like small person that was really like a 5-employee shop,
Dude, 1,000 is a lot. I mean, that's a lot. Now you're talking about 10,000 hours of expertise, right? Like that's a lot of deals. And I think there's a lot of questions that I'm waiting for the audience to pop some questions up here. Like, I've always been fascinated when you talk to me privately, like how do you, because they're not all in one town. That's the thing. They're all around the country. And you're going to be getting into more of your systems and structure on the training on Thursday. So make sure all of you that are watching, stay tuned and get in there for that. But like, I think that's the part that I want the audience to know is you're not flipping in one town or one state. You're flipping all over the country, and you've got systems for that, which, just one town moving to the next town or the next city scares most people in terms of this game. Like how do I find a contractor? How do I know? How do I check on it? Talk a little bit about your systems and processes for how you run that many. Cause it's not like you were doing one at a time and got to 1,000. You were going, what was the most you ever did at one time? Hundreds?
Yeah. I mean, I bought 13 in a day once. I think that was probably the most I bought in a single day. And there'd be some months we'd buy 30 or 40 a month. And just by the nature of an average 90-day hold, there were times we had 100 flips in various levels of completion. And they were average price $500,000. When you talk about kind of systems and like, and how it works. And on Thursday, when we go deep into it, what I do know is my system just works.
Yeah.
Right. It's not easy, but it's super simple. And now we've recently built software that makes it easier, that makes it quicker, that things that used to take us hours and tons of hours. And we used to need 10 different pieces of software to do stuff. We get to do it now. I'll share a quick story before I go into the system.
Yeah, please.
In 2012, 2013, essentially I got put out of business because Blackstone and those big people came to town and said, and I was one of the first people they talked to because I was the biggest buyer at the time.
Sure.
And they were like, hey, come to work for us. And I remember being too young and too dumb and too cocky to even Google who is Blackstone. And I said, you're not going to put me out of business. I'm the biggest buyer ever. Like, I'm not going to go be someone's employee.
Right.
And they did put me out of business because they went and bought all of the properties on the market. I got to learn a lot from them at that time. And I got to learn that strategy and use their strategy in 2021, many years later. But at the time, 2012 to about 2014, now I'm out of business and I'm trying to figure out what to do next. I went from making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month of profit income in my pocket to zero and applying to be an Uber driver and like trying to figure out what was next.
Dude, that's
2015, I ended up at an auction in Texas because I was trying to buy this apartment complex that essentially a listing agent had sent it to me. And it was a unique thing where I'm like, usually I don't get, rent rolls and things for an apartment that's going into foreclosure. The opening bid's pretty low. I should go buy this thing. And I fly out to Texas and I don't have any money really at the time. Like that's right when I was like doing the Uber driver thing. And the opening bid comes out and I get cold feet. It says going once, going twice, sold. And I don't bid on it. And I remember just thinking like, why did I even come out here? Like, did I make a mistake? Did I not make a mistake? Like, but I hadn't had success in a couple years. And so I'm sitting there moping and feeling sorry for myself. And while I'm sitting there, another trustee shows up and he sells like 50 houses for $40,000 a piece and nobody is standing there. So in 2009, when I started buying in Sacramento, there was 3 bidders and 300 houses sold, which meant between us, we had our pick of the litter.
Whatever
we only had to get the most profitable one. We would run out of all the money we had every day. In 2012, there was hundreds of bidders bidding on 2 or 3 houses selling, which means there's no way you're getting a deal.
No.
And I remember the times I was broke, I kept saying, if I ever get another chance, I'm gonna do it way different. Well, 2015 in Texas was that moment where I was like, wow, this is like 2009 California. No one is standing here and hundreds of houses are selling. And then when you talk about the 10,000 hours in California, auction is every day. So if you've been doing auctions for a year in California, right, you've gone to 260 auctions.
Yeah.
If you've done it for 3 years, you've gone to 750, 700, you've done it for 780. You do auction for 3 years and it's for 780.
Yeah.
So I'd been to over like, let's say 800 or 900 auctions. I had bid on, and to buy one house, you're usually bidding on 10 that day.
Right.
So I had bid on 10,000 houses or more, right? By the time I get to Texas. Well, the Texas auction, it was only 1 day a month. And so anyone that had been doing auctions in Texas for a year, they had been to 12 auctions.
Yeah.
Right. So I had already bid on 10,000 properties myself before I went to Texas, and I had my systems on how that worked. And everybody I was competing against in Texas, when people did show up, they had been on 100 in their lifetime, 200 in their lifetime. And I had 10,000 times I got to bid. So I quickly became the biggest buyer in Texas. I quickly was able to use the systems that I maximized in California, and which became this plan that, again, that I said works no matter what. And this time I kept them as rentals. But in foreclosures, there's like, the idea is it's a risky business and it's archaic, but there are ways to mitigate the risk and then to decide what sort of profit I need for that risk. It's like when you're playing, roulette. It's like you pick a number, and if you pick a number and it hits, chances of it hitting aren't very high.
Right.
But if it hits, you win like 30-1 or 40-1.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but that's why, but some people will say, hey, I'm just going to choose red or black because red or black is a 50%. I'm only going to make 2 times my money. So the idea with foreclosures is it's risky, but there's things that we do to reduce the risk.
What's the risk for someone that doesn't know foreclosures and maybe they want to open this up as a lead gen strategy? What are the biggest risks with foreclosures or buying foreclosures?
Yeah. And we have our 5-step plan to kind of get through it. And you can buy houses before auction or at auction. And there's going to be methods for both that we'll talk about on Thursday, but specifically for auction, for courthouse steps, for the things that I bought 1,000 of before I started buying, even before auction, is like step 1 is like you're getting your list and you're filtering it. You're going, hey, there's 100 houses on the list, but which ones do I want to get based on year built, value, making sure it's in a good neighborhood and it's not funky. So there's just a risk of like, you know, who knows? Like we wanted to buy houses that were like the same as all the rest of them in the neighborhood could be predictable. And then you drive by them because the risk there is one, like sometimes there's mad people that had got foreclosed on. They flushed concrete down the toilet. Sometimes squatters are in there and they're trashing the place. Sometimes the houses are burnt down. There was recently one in Texas last year that's in my book where a month before auction, the house was there. And on the day of auction, the city had demoed it the day before because of some liens. So somebody thought they were buying a house and it was an empty lot that they bought that was gone. And so so like driving by houses, and then it's also like occupancy. So you're going by to see what's the condition of the house. What can you see from the outside? Can you peek in the windows? What can you see from the inside? And then is it occupied by a tenant or is it occupied by an owner? And depending on the state, a tenant can stay like in Texas, they don't have any rights. Like in California, a tenant can stay for a long time after you buy it. So the other risk is occupancy. So those are things that you're doing. And so let's say it's occupied, right? And there's more risks we'll get into, but let's say it's occupied. You could instantly say, all right, I want to make 20% on my money instead of 10 because there's more risk because I don't know how soon they're going to leave. I don't know if they're going to be a problem or not. But if it's really vacant and if it's vacant and it's nice, and you know that the day you buy it at auction, you're going to change the keys, you know exactly what to do. Well, then you could say, all right, there's less risk here. There's less unknowns. I'm going to do it for 10% profit instead of 20. So you try to reduce your unknown. So one is you filter and drive by the properties. Next, you do title runs on the properties. You try to make sure you're buying a first deed of trust, that you're not buying a second. There are various types of loans that come up for auction, and it can be a little tricky. Again, researching title is very, very simple, right? Very simple process, but it's not easy. It takes time. It's tedious. You go through. And so that's another step that you do before you go. And I think the other, the other risks is really like right now, the risk is like being able to price it right. Because you are doing a live auction, you have to know exactly how much you're willing to spend on something. And so, and essentially you're going to win by $100. The person that you beat, you're going to bid $203,000 and they're going to bid $203,100. You're going to bid $203,200 and then they're out. When you win, it's over $100. So if your final bid is winning over $100, you've really got to dial in like exactly what I'm going to be able to sell this thing for, you know, even though it's all a bunch of best guesses. You know, what do I think I'm going to spend on it? What do I think I'm going to do that? So yeah, risks are occupancy type for the most part, and then title work, and then just unknown of the fact that you just don't have, you're having to buy one house, you're having to essentially research 100 houses over a 2-week period. So you're having to combine a lot of info in a very short period of time to decide. So you take 100 houses, you filter, you drive, you do title. Now you actually show up to auction with a list of 30. 20 of them cancel because they sold before auction. 10 of them you get to bid on. And out of that 10, you're hoping to buy one.
It is a lot of work. And that's why you have to systematize, which you're going to get into on Thursday. So there's a question real quick that has to do with this. I want to jump into. How much does the legal ease of eviction play into the market that you target?
It definitely plays into the market that we target. So if I was going to buy in California, I would either only buy if I knew it was an owner.
Okay.
So we'd only buy occupied if it was an owner, which they have less rights, or if we made a deal with them ahead of time to move out. Because there is a chance with a tenant or an owner, we knock on every door and sometimes we make a deal. But if it's occupied and we don't make a deal with them in California before auction, won't bid on it no matter what.
Interesting.
Right? Absolutely won't buy an occupied house if I haven't made contact with who's in it in California. In Texas, I don't worry about it at all. Right? Occupancy is a much different deal here. So the eviction, and even during COVID, there were some counties that allowed evictions and some counties that didn't. Right? So like up in Dallas, you couldn't do evictions in some of those areas. Whereas in between Dallas and Austin, the smaller counties, you could do evictions the whole time COVID. There was no moratorium on them in the smaller counties. The bigger counties, they were. So definitely the ease of eviction would help me determine like where I'm going to buy occupied properties. But there's still, a lot of them end up being vacant. Maybe half of them are vacant when auction hits.
Yeah. But that's there's always risk and reward in all these different games. But like this one seems really risky because it's like a bet on every single layer of buying an auction property or buying a foreclosure auction property. Like you do all this work up front. Well, like running the numbers on a basic flip it's off the MLS or the wholesaler sent to you. Not that big a deal. You run your numbers, put the contract in. You don't get it, you don't get it. But this is a lot of work. You got, because especially in the different cities, you've got drivers, you've got guys taking pictures, uploading the pictures. You guys are looking at them from like a central hub. You've got like all this title work being done. How do you justify the expenses that go into the 2 weeks of pre-work to then buy one house? How do you justify that? Or do you just obviously have to mitigate it, but how do you do all that?
Yeah. And I tell people, it's always funny when I bring people to their first auction and they're like, it says the auction starts at 1. Why aren't they here yet?
Right.
Like, well, because they can stop by any time between 1 and 4. They're like, well, what do they look like? We don't know. How are we going to know? Well, you'll know when you see it. And they're like always baffled by like how archaic so much of it is.
Yeah.
And when I try to tell people, so you got to fall in love with the problem. I don't like competition. I don't like, that's why like at the end I loved bidding in California when I was one of, 3 bidders. I didn't like it when I was one of 300. The only time it's kept working is if I'd go find counties where nobody else was. So even though it's work, one of the ways you justify it is like you fall in love with the problem. And because the problem is where money is made. If it was easy, the profit margin wouldn't be big. And
Sure.
so even though it does take a lot of work to put into it, I mean, that should show how much profit can be on the other side. Sometimes when we're driving houses, there's these examples where it's like, oh, this house is in Canyon Lake, which is an hour away from the nearest town. And there's only one house up there scheduled. Do we go drive up there or not? So like, why wouldn't you drive up there? Because you're going to drive 10 houses in an hour or 11 houses in 2 hours. So in one sense, it doesn't feel very inefficient. In the other sense, if that one goes to auction, you'll be the only one that drove it. And when it comes to the way that the bid works out, people show up for auction to go bid at 10 o'clock. And you don't know if auction's going to happen at 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock. And it happens at every county at the same time while it's happening. And so so people are choosing, I only have checks for one. I'm going to go stand in this county today. If they're there and their house gets canceled, they get in the car and they go rush to the other county to see if they can make it in time.
Yeah.
And I've had times where I bought houses. I remember this one time I had a max bid of $560,000. And I'm there and the opening bid comes out at $340,000 and nobody else is standing there. And I'm looking around and the auctioneer calls it off, going once, going twice, sold. I buy it for $340,000 when I was expecting to pay $560,000 for it. And I'm terrified that I got something wrong. I'm terrified that I miscomped it, that I did title wrong, that like just something isn't working the way that I thought it was going to work. I was just shocked. And 2 minutes later, 3 guys come running up to bid. They'd come from another auction. They were there to go bid on that property. And if they had been on time, I probably wouldn't have bought it, right? They would have probably outbid me. If one other person would have been there, I would have paid at least $450,000 or $500,000 for it. And so auction, and most of the time it is like, so you're doing all the prep in order to make a 10, a 15, or 20% profit on your bid. But on occasion, nobody shows up or nobody else drove the Canyon Lake property and the bid comes out way, way low. And so you're doing all of it for like a 10 to 20, but then every once in a while you have this kind of home run that happens. Yeah. And those are the extra special ones.
How do you work through that fear? Because I know when I was doing courthouse stuff in 2012 and 2013, I had a private money lender here in Baltimore that was like, what else can we do? How else can we spend my money? I was like, well, let's go bid at the courthouse. I had no idea. Just like you, I had no idea. And I was scared, man, because he was standing there with me and my wife was there with me. So he's like, get up there, bid. And, I saw the list that came out. I ran comps. I didn't do a lot of due diligence. So I was really worried. How do you mitigate that fear? How do you maybe not even rationalize, but how do you work through that fear of, holy shit, I just spent $340,000. Like, did I make a massive mistake? Or I've got 10 guys at 10 different auctions that have $2 million worth of my money. What if they get it wrong? Or what if all of our data is wrong? Like, how do you work through that inside of your head?
Yeah. There's this balance of trusting your process and then also having some systems of control. So meaning if I have a new bidder bidding somewhere for me, I'll want to be on the phone with them when they bid, right?
Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm on the phone with them at the time, the first couple times, so I can at least hear like, okay, is it the right process? Are you doing it? Ideally, they're going to go with me a couple times first. So when it does come to, and it's a lot of texting, hey, confirm, this is the max bid, confirm back, yes, this is the max bid. Okay, we bought it. Because sometimes I can't be on the phone with them because there's 3 of my people bidding at the same time in different places. And then it is really easy when you're standing there at auction to second guess your work, especially when the opening bid comes out so low.
Sure.
But that is like, that's why you're doing it. You're doing it in order to have the chance to be, to buy it for $200,000 less. Although that's the most terrifying thing.
That's
You're always
what I'm
like,
saying.
oh my God, like I can't believe no one else was here. Maybe I shouldn't buy it. This opening bid is so low. Maybe it's tricking me. And so the way that you get over that is you remind yourself that's why you're doing it. And then you also know that when you did the research, like I always tell myself, like you come up with your max bid the day before when you're unemotional.
Yeah.
And you stick with that. Because on the day of auction, it's much easier to get emotional. It's halfway through the day, you haven't bought something yet, or you'll start second guessing. But you got to remember when you were making the decision for it, you were doing title from a computer with 3 monitors and going through it. When you decided what you were going to sell it for, you were doing that. When you decided like how much you were going to spend on construction, you were looking at pictures. Like you had all the resources put in place before you put that max bid together.
Yeah.
And so then the only other fear you could have is like, did I make a typo? And so you just have to trust yourself that I did not make a typo, in there. And when I was doing the work, I was at my best. So if you don't trust yourself, it is really easy at the last second to go like, maybe I shouldn't bid on this. And you just have to remind yourself like, no, when I was doing the work and the underwriting, coming up with these max bids, I wasn't thinking about anything else. I wasn't focusing on anything else except for how to make this work. But it still happens. And sometimes when I get really, anxious on auction day, which still does happen sometimes, and I've got my bidders that I trust, I'll send them all their max bids, and then I'll just go lay down. I've been up since early getting them prepped. Just try to not think about it, and I just kind of wait for text messages to see if they're coming in, and just try to watch TV or something.
Yeah.
There's less of a chance of me to second guess something at that point.
Dude, it's funny that you say that because, unlike bidding on a, off market property or an MLS property where you don't see the people, there isn't a lot of energy in the room. Your realtor doesn't pile you in a room with other bidders and run around getting bids from everybody. There's a totally different psychology when you're doing this kind of bidding, when you're doing this kind of lead gen or prep work, and you're sitting at that auction. And if your numbers if you're not confident in 1, yourself, and 2, in your numbers and your process or your systems, that environment is going to mess you up. I remember the first time I went to the auction and I was like, my max bid was like 217 or 220. And I wound up paying 265 for this property because I got jacked up, man. I was like, no, I can control.
They're bidding on it. I must be missing something.
Right. I can control the cost. I'll buy the lumber myself and I'll bring it in a U-Haul truck. Like start thinking all this crazy stuff. And we sold that property. We bought it. I also I underestimated how much the cleanup was going to be. I underestimated how much the backyard regrading was going to be. We made like 50 grand on it, but we could have made 100 grand if I had bought it right and if I had managed the budget better. So I learned, but really you have to learn from your mistakes. Like you can't just take all these courses and learn everything. Your courses, you can learn 95%. Would you say the other 5% has to be time on task? It's got to be in the action where Aaron's system might not be exactly what works for you, or it's exactly right, but not for this county or whatever it might be. So like action and activity is the best thing to solve all the fear, because then you can start gathering evidence to say, oh, it's not that scary. I mean, it is a couple $1,000,000 and well, if I lose it, I can make it back. I'll figure it out. But you're not going to lose on all of them unless you're completely just irresponsible. Here's another question I had that I wanted to ask you before. You were doing so well during that first round, after the construction company kind of did their thing and you really started in this foreclosure, like courthouse stuff. Like, how did you get to driving Uber? Because I think a lot of people are like texting me going, wait a minute, if he was doing all those flips, how is he driving Uber a couple years later?
Yeah. I tell people if I would have been in GoBundance in 2009, I would be a billionaire today. And I don't, and that is a very literal thing.
Yeah.
because what was happening from 2009 to 2012, I was in my young 20s flipping all those houses and making all that money, but I didn't have any mentors that really taught me about it. I didn't have
Yeah.
really any mentors that said like, hey, you should like invest some of this money. And then I
Oh,
also was at the point where I was like trying to build this like Google type office that was like, I want to make sure that meals are provided for my people. There was like a lot of ego stuff that came in with so much money coming in. And so then you have a lot of money in savings. And I started that year with over $1 million in the bank. And then when you start going to auction and you're not buying any houses, right? It's tough to lay people off when you're like, so essentially, so I had heavy monthly expenses.
yeah.
And so like salaries, everybody had company cars, health insurance packages, stuff in the office. And you're
Crazy.
showing up to auction and you just don't buy anything because you're getting outbid by Blackstone. So that month you spend a couple $100,000 in overhead. The next month you spend a couple $100,000 in overhead. I
Damn.
remember at the end of the year, asking Kalina, I said, hey, I need you to move some money from your account into mine so I can make payroll. And she goes, I don't have any money left in my account. That was the brokerage account from all the sales.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh my gosh, we don't have any money left. I learned during that time that as soon as and this is the advice I gave people recently, and they've done it, 9 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago, and they've called me back saying it saved their business. As soon as it's going the other way, you want to cut costs, you want to cut salaries, you want to cut people faster and deeper than you want to, because as soon as you do layoffs, like the other people do fill in and they can handle it. And you're also doing a favor to your people. If you lay somebody off first before all the other companies start laying people off, they actually have a chance to go get another job.
Right. Exactly.
If you wait till the end. So I remember telling everybody like, hey, I can make payroll today. And so it was really, my overhead was killing me. And I was too proud to like call it in and decide. My big difference, and I've only got a few more minutes before I got to go pick up the kids today.
Yeah, me too.
But my big difference, what I did in 2000, I kept saying, I remember thinking in 2012, if I would have just kept 100 of those flips, I'd have been set for life. What was I thinking? So in 2015, when I got my new chance, I'd start flying out to Texas. I'd buy 10 houses during the month and I'd fix them. And I was like, this time I'm going to keep them as rentals.
Right.
And so I would sell a couple to like pay my bills and pay my overhead. And I would put renters in the rest of them. And I remember like a year in having 100 houses, but my cash flow at the time wasn't even, I think I had 100 houses, but my like monthly cash flow was maybe like $5,000 or $6,000 a month. And I'm just thinking, this is a lot of work
Yeah.
to only be making 5,000 or 6,000 in horizontal. And by the next year, it was like a couple hundred. And then it did start to snowball where I'm like, okay, now I've got a couple hundred. Now my monthly income is 10 or 12, and I keep buying these more assets. When COVID hit in 2020, I owned about 550 houses near Austin, Texas. Right. And they tripled in value.
Yeah.
Which was just an incredible blessing where we're investing in singles, right? Like very
Actually
simple,
paid off.
buying a rental, making 100 a month,
Right.
paid off like a home run. And I think real estate is one of the few things you can do that on. I'm going to share just one or two more quick stories and hope that some people join us on Thursday as a result. January 2021, when I talk about like Trend Spotter and some of the other stuff I'll talk on my trainings or my podcasts and things. January 2021, the market was very similar to what it felt like with Blackstone in 2012. We just had this big run up after COVID. January 2021, people were now scared. They were slowing down. Hey, I think we're in a bubble. I think it's about to crash. Prices just went up 40%. I think we're done. And so like people were scared and skittish, and builders were scared and skittish, and no one was buying their product. And we made this prediction and said, like we just had a new election. We have more stimulus that's coming in. Rates are low. Inflation's going to go through the roof. And I remember texting my real estate agent at the time. And this was the Blackstone move. Because what I didn't know when Blackstone said they were going to put me out of business is I thought they were going to like pick houses based on rental. What I realized is they bought everything on the market on MLS, everything on the market at auction, and prices jumped 60% in value. And so that was their business plan. So January 2021, I text my agent and say, hey, I need to buy $40 million worth of product in the next 90 days. They send me everything on MLS dated 1985 and newer. And we bought everything we could in that county, January 2021. And a lot of it were new home neighborhoods. And by the time the construction was finished in October, there's tons of duplex neighborhoods where we were in contract for $270,000 a duplex.
Yeah.
When we closed in October, they were appraising at $410,000 at closing. We were doing cash out refis at closing on purchase.
Damn, dude.
And so that was like getting to take a really crappy situation from then and do it better this time. And so there's a lot of like real estate is like going through the motions and putting forth the effort. I'll say, I've had a lot of the ups and downs, and now I've been like really, really lucky with what I've been able to build with all the businesses. I was in the right place at the right time, like 3 different times in my life, right? I was in Texas during, that. I was in Sacramento during 2009. They say, why is Bill Gates Bill Gates? Like, well, his odds were better because he was like living 5 minutes from the first computer that was like accessible to humans, right? Like he was right place at the right time. But everybody in the neighborhood didn't become Bill Gates. Everybody in his school didn't become Bill Gates. So the combination was I was in the right place at the right time. Like Bill Gates was close to the computer. Plus I've put forth an enormous amount of effort, like flying to Texas every month, spending a week at the Shiloh Inn hotel. That's not a nice, fun lifestyle. Like it was several years of work before it paid off to where it has today. Now I have a very nice, fun lifestyle that paid off. But some of the class I'm going to do with you guys on Thursday, I did this like 8-hour course in my office. We're going to do the jam-packed version Thursday. And a guy was sitting in the front row of that class asking me lots of questions. 2 weeks later, he goes and door knocks the house, gets it under contract. And he calls me because during the class, he's like, well, what if I don't have any money? Well, no, this is how you can do foreclosure without any money. He calls me and I write him a $35,000 check because he assigned the contract to me. So it was really crazy. So he did this, he did this investment, came to my class. 3 weeks later, he got a $35,000 check from what he learned. So the stuff that I teach is legit. I can't wait to talk to your people about it. I'm so pumped about what you're doing, with Flip Trader.
Thanks,
man. And, we didn't get to go too much. So I guess, are any quick questions we might be
There
able to?
There are a lot of questions. You remember Bill Cafaretta? You met him randomly at
oh, yeah.
Event?
I saw, I saw, and how randomly that you guys were related. He listened to the podcast. That's how he met you. Fun stuff. Bill, good to see you if you're on here.
Yeah, man. So Bill says, you said at a meetup in Austin last month that you think we're in the final 1/3 of this downward shift. Do you still believe that? And where do you see the market going in the next 3 to 6 months? It's a great question.
Yeah. So right now, I don't think, I just recorded a pretty deep podcast about this on the King's Table with the guys. And I kind of think that it's going to be like the 90s for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Before 2001, before September 11th, 2001, rates range from like high 6s to like the 9s off and on.
Yeah.
They were never really sub 7 except for like a couple special times. And then September 11th happened, biggest crisis of the world. And they said, let's use the Fed to lower rates. So they lowered rates after September 11th and they started using the Fed to empower spending and things like that. It became a weapon during tough times that the prior 50-year history was never a weapon.
Sure.
But September 1st, 2001 is when the real estate market and the Fed changed forever based on the crisis. And then we saw it in the foreclosure crisis of 2012. They re-stimulated it by lowering rates. And then we saw it again in COVID 2020. They lowered rates to stimulate the economy because they thought that's what they needed to do. Well, I think now they've realized how bad that was for the long-term economy. It was short-term fixes. And I think that now, once the reset's done, I think interest rates will be between 7, 8, 9% for years now. I don't think that I'll be shocked if we get below 7% in the next 3 years. That being said, I don't think, I think it's going back to the way it was in the 90s. I don't actually think it's temporary anymore. I think now they're going to be like, cool, we learned our lesson. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to stop using the Fed to adjust stuff. Let's just keep rates stable because there's other ways, there's other problems that we can do. And so I do think we're in the bottom third of price corrections. Now in Austin, we're down 25% from where we were at the peak. We might have another 7% to go, but that would still be in that bottom third. Next 3 to 6 months, Bill, I think it's going to be really, really stale. I think commercial and industrial foreclosures and apartments, we're going to see a lot more foreclosures in that. It'll trickle downhill a little bit, but I think we're just in this stalemate. I think we're in this stalemate where I'm not going to sell my house even if I want to. Because if I moved, my payment would go from $9,000 a month to $33,000 a month for the same house.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So it's like, and people can't really pay. So I think we're just gonna be in this stalemate. The people want to buy for $200,000 in a neighborhood. Sellers want to sell for $300,000, but they don't even really want to sell for $300,000 because if they move, they're not going to find a place. So it's going to be really, really slow next 6 months.
Yeah. And it's a stalemate because it's not negotiation at that point. It is a stalemate. You want 300, you want to pay 200. There is no middle ground because the 300 is what they need. The 200 is what they can afford. There is no middle ground to
right. The
to work
buyer
for.
will give them
Right.
the last thing I'll say, and then I
Yeah.
totally have to
Yeah.
run, and great to see all you guys. But send me some of these questions. I'd love to start our day
Just jump
Thursday
on
with
the
them or
feed.
email.
Just jump on the
Yeah.
feed and you can just go in and answer them.
Cool. Yeah. Tag, like,
Yep.
send me over the feed so I can make sure I can go answer people on there. A buyer will pay you everything they can.
Yeah.
They will give you as much money as their lender will let them. Buyers aren't, especially entry-level buyers, they aren't good financial. I wasn't good at finances until I was in my 30s. Right? So like a buyer will give you all the money they're allowed to, but they're maxed out now. But the buyer's buying power is 30% of what it was. So a buyer that could have bought a house for $900,000 in 2021 can buy one for 300 now. Right? Like, so that explains why we're in this stalemate. So they'll give you all the money they can, but they are only able to pay 300 for a neighborhood, for a house that like fits their lifestyle, what they expect based on what their friends had, all that stuff. So we're going to see a stalemate. But Ian, this was awesome today. Good to see you. Can't wait to get back with you guys on Thursday. Get to actually do some actual deals. But thanks for letting me share my story.
Absolutely, dude. We could go for hours. So we'll have you back on. Remember, guys, Aaron's on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I'll be on Real Estate Rockstars. We're going to hopefully record this week. So we're going to be getting into more stuff, my story, more stories about Aaron and I. Aaron, thanks so much, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. I can't wait to have you on Rockstars. Thanks, everybody, for watching today. And we'll let you know when Ian's going to be on there, too.
All right. Thanks, Flip Trader. We'll catch you in the next one.